Alrighty, alrighty. Welcome back to another thrilling installment of Free Read Fridays. I'm your intrepid narrator, Fraggeth, and today we're going to be reading more of The Lazarus Effect by Frank Herbert and Bill Ransom. Previously on, the plot's really starting to move in a big way. Gelaar Gallow and his green dashers are back, and they are taking prisoners. Um, I am doing well. Thank you for tuning in, Bell Helken. I am doing well. Let's see. What else is going on? There's so much going on, it feels like it's skipping stuff. That's how much is going on. Wow, that is a long chapter. Golly. Um, let's see. Scudi Wang and Brett Norton managed to escape the clutches of Gelaar Gallow and his Green Dashers, which is good for them. Kareen, Ale, and Ward Keel are kidnapped off screen. Not 100% sure how that happens. I can't remember if they go back and explain how that worked. Um, just they're generally like, "Oh, Ward Keel's waking up. Don't worry about it." Yes, he's been kidnapped. Oh, how did they get to the surf? Okay. Um, Presumably he and Kareen Ale were uh, she was taking him in transit to the launch base, but I don't think we're ever really filled in on how Ward Keel got away from the people who were keeping him in that room. Um, I can't remember if that got explained or not. At any rate, he's not doing so great. His lifetimer is ticking away. Um, Trying to remember if anything else happened. Nothing off the top of my head. Oh yeah, the Kelp. The Kelp's talking to people. It's apparently gained enough critical mass to start thinking for itself. Um, and the last line of last time was a stricken look on her face. Scudi nodded. It's finally learned to kill. So the kelp is killing folk and talking to them. Um, not necessarily in that order, but not necessarily not in that order either, as we'll learn, as has been implied by the Green Dashers. So things have gotten dramatic real quick. What does this mean going forward? I guess we'll find out on this latest installment of the Lazarus Effect. Um, do tell me if the audio still sounds tinny. Right now, my other network is down, so I'm using a backup network, and hopefully that is less problematic than last week. We will find out. And yeah, let's get rocking and a rolling. And this should be the second to last installment, the penultimate installment of this book. As I have indicated before, after I finish this one, we'll go to Death's End by Cixin Liu, and then to the final volume of the Pandora sequence, which is the Ascension Factor. So we won't be doing the Ascension Factor immediately after this one. We'll have to wait a couple months. Anyway, let's get rolling. Hasn't the water of sleep dissolved our being? Gaston Bachelard, The Poetics of Reverie, from the Handbook of the Chaplain Psychiatrist. Duque woke to a nudge, a deliberate jostling intended to do the waking. He had been prodded, pricked, rubbed, shocked, bled, and rocked in his liquid cradle with the great Vata, but this was the first time since childhood that he had been nudged. What surprised him was that it was Vata who did it. "You're awake," he thought, but there was no answer. He felt a focus, a channeling of her presence such as he had never felt before. For this he roused himself, twisted an arm up to his face, and fisted his good eye open. He brought the watchers to the Vata pool. That brought the watchers to the Vata pool on the double. What he saw with his one eye was worth calling those fools poolside. One of Vata's huge brown eyes, her left one, was pressed nearly to his own. It was open. Duque swallowed hard. He was sure she could see him. Vata? He tried it aloud. Vata? The growing crowd gasped, and Duque knew that the CP would push her way to them soon. He felt something breeze through his consciousness like a heavy sigh. It was a wind with hidden thoughts in it, but he felt them. Something big, waiting. Duque was shocked. He had long been used to the mind-rocking power Vata could hurl between his eyes. This was the way she threw tantrums, by jamming whatever frustrated her right into his head. Now she sent him a vision of the CP, naked, dancing in front of a mirror. For some time now, Vata had kept the naked female thoughts out of his heads. Anger. Vata contained anger. He blocked out the anger and riveted his inner eye on the supple, firm-breasted chaplain psychiatrist who thrust her pale hips again and again at the mirror. The tank was unbearably warm. Simone Roxack's favorite robe lay in a trampled blue heap at her feet. Everything in Duque strained to touch this vision, this body of raw beauty that the CP locked away from the world. That was when he saw the hands. A pair of large, pale hands snaked around her form from behind, and he watched in the mirror as they cupped her swaying breasts while she moved in a rhythmic step-slide, step-slide. It was a man, a large man, and he continued his intense caress of her body until she slowed her dance and stopped, quivering, while his lips brushed her shoulders and breasts, her abdomen, those glistening thighs. The man's shock of blonde hair was magnet to her fingers. Her hands pulled him close, closer, and they began to make love with him, standing behind her, facing the mirror. The vision ended with an angry white flash, and the name Gallow blared across his consciousness. What he saw when he refocused on Vata's eye was danger. Danger, he muttered. Gallow, danger. Simone, Simone. Vata's great brown eye closed, and Duque felt relieved of a massive claw-like grip that had held his guts tight. He lay back, breathing deeply, and listened as the knot of watchers grew and the babble of their spectators lulled him back to sleep. When the CP came to poolside, there was nothing visible of the strange thing the watchers reported.
To survive Pandora's time of madness, we were forced to go mad.
Is Bushka, The Physics of Political Expression. Brett woke at dawn, feeling the coracle riding gently under him. Scudi lay curled against his side. Twisp sat at his usual place by the tiller, but the boat chugged along on autopilot. Brett could see the little red traveler lights blinking across the face of the receiver, keeping them on course to Vachon. Scudi sniffed in her sleep. A light tarp kept the damp night air from both of them.
Brett inhaled a deep breath through his nose and faced the fact that he would never again accept the stench that surrounded every place islanders lived. He had experienced the merman's filtered air. Now, the fish odors, the thick miasma from Twisp's body, all of it forced Brett to think even more deeply about how his life had been changed.
I smelled like that, he thought. It's a good thing Scudi met me in the water.
Mermen joked about islanders' stink, he knew, and islanders returning topside spoke longingly of the sweet air down under. Scudi had said nothing on meeting Twisp nor on boarding the coracle, but the distaste on her face had been evident. She had tried to hide it for his sake, he knew, but the reaction was unmistakable. Brett felt guilty about his sudden embarrassment.
You shouldn't be embarrassed by your friends.
The first long shaft of dawn washed across the coracle, a lazy pink. Brett sat up. Twisp, his voice low and muffled at the stern, said, "Take the watch, kid. I'll need a few winks."
Right.
Brett whispered to keep from waking Scudi. She lay curled up close, her back and hips fitting into the socket of his body as if they were built together. One hand lay flung backward around Brett's waist. He gently disengaged her light grip. Looking up at the clear sky, Brett thought, "It's gonna be a hot one." He slid out from beneath the tarp and felt the damp bow spray wet his hair and face. Brett brushed a thick lock of hair from his eyes and crept aft to take the tiller. "Gonna be a hot one," Twisp said. Brett smiled at the coincidence. They thought alike now, no question about it. He scanned the horizon. The boats still glided down a narrow avenue of current between the hedging kelp.
Aren't we going kind of slow? Brett asked.
"Yield cells are getting low," Twisp said. He gestured with a foot at the telltale pink of discharge on the cell pack set into the deck. "Gonna have to stop and charge 'em or raise sail." Brett wet a finger in his mouth and raised it to the air. There was only the coolness of their own passage, flat calm everywhere he looked, and gently undulating kelp fronds as far as the eye could see. "We should be raising Vashon pretty soon," Twisp said. "I caught the Seabird program while you were asleep. Everything's going well, so they say."
"I thought you wanted some shut-eye," Brett said.
"Changed my mind. I want to see Vashon first. Sides, I miss all the times we'd just sit up and shoot the shit. I've just been dozing and thinking here since I relieved you at midnight."
"And listening to the radio," Brett said.
He indicated the half earphone jacked into the receiver. "Real interesting what they have to say," Twisp said. He kept his voice low, his attention on the mound that was the sleeping figure of Bushka.
"Things are going well," Brett prompted.
"Seabird says Vashon is inside a land that is well out of the water. He describes black cliffs, high cliffs, and waves forming white at the base. People could live there, he says." Brett tried to visualize this. Cliff was a word Brett had heard rarely.
"How could we get people and supplies up the cliff?" Brett asked. "And what happens if the sea rises again?"
"Way I see it, you'd have to be part bird to live there," Twisp agreed, "if you needed the sea. And fresh water might be scarce."
"LTAs might help."
"Maybe catch basins for the rain," Twisp mused. "But the big problem they're worried about is nerve runners." In the bow, Bushka lifted himself out of his tarp and stared aft at Brett and Twisp. Brett ignored the man. Nerve runners. He knew them only from the scant early hollows and the histories from before the dark times of the rising sea and the death of the kelp. "Once there's open land, there'll be nerve runners," Twisp said. "That's what the experts are saying."
You pay for everything," Bushka said.
He patted the back of his open hand against his mouth, yawning widely. Something had changed in Bushka, Brett realized. When he accepted that his story about Guimes was believed, Bushka had become a tragicomic figure instead of a villain.
"Did he change, or is it just that we're seeing him different?" Brett wondered. Scudi lifted herself from beneath her tarp and said, "Did I hear somebody say something about nerve runners?" Brett explained. "But Vashon can see land?" Scudi asked. "Real land?"
Twisp nodded. "So they say." He reached down and tugged at a pair of lines trailing over the side of the coracle. Immediately their squawks set up a flapping commotion beside the boat, spattering cold water all around. Bushka caught most of the splashing.
"Ship's teeth!" he gasped. "That's cold!"
Twisp chuckled. "Wakes you up good," he said. "Just imagine what—" He broke off and bent his head in a listening attitude. The others heard it too. All turned toward the horizon on their port, where the distant pulse of a hydrogen ram could be heard. They saw it then, a white line far off across the kelp.
"Foil," Bushka said. "They're turning toward us."
"Their instruments have locked onto us," Twisp said.
"They're not going to Vashon. They're coming to us," Bushka said.
"He may be right," Brett said. Twisp jerked his chin down and up. "Brett, you and Scudi take your dive suits and those kits. You hit the water. Hide in the kelp. Bushka, there's an old green duffel bag under the deck forward. Haul it out." Brett, struggling into his suit, remembered what was in that bag.
"What are you going to do with your spare net?" he asked.
"We'll lay it here."
I don't have a dive suit," Bushka moaned.
"You'll hide under the top there in the cuddy," Twisp said. "Over the side, you two. Hurry it up, Scudi. String that net along the kelp." Presently, after hurried preparations, Bushka burrowed his way beneath the tarp and crawled under the forward deck. Brett and Scudi rolled backward over the side of the boat, pulling the net with them. The sound of the approaching foil was growing louder. Twisp stared toward the sound. The foil was still 8 or 10 kilometers to port, but closing faster than he had thought possible. He hauled in his squawks and caged them, then found 2 hand lines. He baited them with dried muri and slung them over the side. The raft! It bobbed against the side of the supply coracle like a beacon. Twisp shot out a long arm, grabbed the line, and pulled it to him. He slit it open, rolled the air out of it as fast as he could, and stowed it under his seat. Brett and Scudi, he saw, were getting something out of the supply coracle. Harpoon? Damn! They had better hurry. He glanced around his coracle then. Bushka lay concealed under the bow cuddy. The net trailed aft. Scudi and Brett had gone under water into the kelp. Why did Brett want a harpoon? Twisp wondered. They were safely under the kelp, though, taking their surface air from beneath huge leaves. Twisp cut his motor and slipped the laser gun out of its hiding place behind him. He put it under a towel beside him on the seat and kept his hand on it. "Bushka," he called, "stay as quiet as a dead fish. If it's them, well, we don't know. I'll give you the all clear if it's not." He wiped the back of his free hand across his mouth. "Here they are." He raised a hand in greeting as the foil circled in over the kelp, scattering torn green fronds in its wake. It avoided the net and the side of the channel where Brett and Scudi had taken to the water. No response came to his greeting, just intense stares from 2 dark figures in the high cockpit. Twisp saw streaks of green on the figures up there. He breathed deeply to slow his heartbeat and steady the trembling in his legs. "Be ready," he warned himself, "but don't be jumpy." The foil swung wide astern and sank into the channel through the kelp. The jet subsided to a faint hiss. A heavy wave rolled out from the foil's bow and rocked the coracles. The squawks set up a loud complaint. Once more, Twisp raised a hand in greeting and waved at the approaching foil to the left. Indicating the long line of his net with its bobbing floats. When no more than 20 meters separated the craft, Twisp shouted, "Good weather and good catch!" He tightened his grip on the laser gun. The choppy crosswave set up by the foil broke over the coracle's thwarts and soaked him. Still no response from the foil, which now loomed high over him and no more than 10 meters away.
Its side hatch slid open, and a merman appeared there in a camouflaged dive suit, green blobs and stripes. The foil slid alongside and came to a stop. The merman standing above Twisp said, "I thought mutes never fished alone." "You thought wrong. I thought no mute fished out of sight of his island. This one does." The merman's quick eyes flitted over both coracles, followed the line of floats astern, then fixed on Twisp. "Your net's strung along a kelp bed," he said. "You could lose it that way." "Kelp means fish," Twisp said. He kept his voice level, calm. He even flashed a smile. "Fishermen go where the catch is." Under the foil's bow, too low to be visible to the merman, Twisp saw Scudi slip up for air, then drift down. "Where's your catch? What's it to you?" The merman squatted on the deck above Twisp and looked down at him. "Listen, shitbug, you can disappear out here. Now I've got some questions and I want answers. If I like the answers, you keep your net, your boat, your catch, and maybe you keep alive. Do you understand?" Twisp remained silent. Out of the corner of one eye, he caught a glimpse of Brett's head surfacing onto the other side of the foil's bow. Actually, I just realized it cannot be Gallow. It's not Gallow. Fudge. Okay, we'll change the voice. "Listen, shitbug, you can disappear out here. Now I've got some questions and I want answers. If I like the answers, you keep your net, your boat, your catch, and maybe you keep alive. Do you understand?" Twisp remained silent. Out of the corner of one eye, he caught a glimpse of Brett's head surfacing onto the other side of the foil's bow. Brett's hand came up gripping the harpoon from the supply coracle. "What's he doing with that thing?" Twisp wondered. "And he's in too close for me to use the stun shield if the chance comes." "Aye," Twisp said. "No catch yet. Just got set up." Brett and Scudi disappeared from his sight around the other side of the foil. "Have you seen anyone else on the water?" the merman asked. "Not since the wave wall." The merman looked at Twisp's grizzled, weather-beaten face and said, "You've been out ever since the wave wall?" There was awe in his voice. "Yeah." He dropped the awe. "And no catch?" he snapped. "You're not much of a fisherman. Not much of a liar, either. You sit still. I'm coming aboard." He signaled his intentions to someone out of view in the foil, then flipped a stubby ladder over the side. The merman's movements were deft and controlled. He used no more than the minimal energy required for each action. Twisp noted this and felt a deep sense of caution. "This man knows his body," Twisp thought, "and it's a weapon." It would be difficult to take this man by surprise. But Twisp knew his own strengths. He had leverage and a net puller's power. He also had a lasgun under his towel. The merman began lowering himself into the coracle. One foot probed backward for the thwart, and, as the merman put his weight onto that foot, Twisp moved backward as though compensating for the weight shift. The merman smiled and released both hands from the ladder. He turned to make the last step down into the coracle. Twisp reached his long left arm out to steady the man and, as he moved, shifted his weight. Twisp allowed the man to feel a firm grip in the clasp of the hand, steadying him against the roll of the boat until the last possible blink. Then, in one smooth move, Twisp shifted farther toward the merman, shortened his long-armed grip, and tipped that side of the boat completely underwater. The merman lurched forward. Twisp twisted his grip and snaked around the merman's neck while the other hand came up with the lasgun pressed against the back of his head. I'm going to reread that sentence because I think I mangled it. The long left arm the long left arm released its grip and snaked around the merman's neck, while the other hand came up with the lasgun pressed against the back of his head. "Don't move or you could disappear out here," Twisp said. "Go ahead and kill me, mute." The merman thrashed against Twisp. Twisp tightened his grip. Muscles that single-handedly pulled loaded nets over a coracle's rim stood out in sinewy ropes. "Tell your mates to step out on deck," Twisp growled. "He won't come out and he's gonna kill you." "Sorry, he won't come out and he's gonna kill you," the merman choked. He twisted again in the powerful grip. One foot braced against a thwart, and he tried to push Twisp backward. Twisp lifted the laser gun and brought it down sharply against the man's head. The merman grunted and went limp. Twisp lifted the laser gun's barrel toward the open hatch and started to rise. He didn't like the idea of going up that ladder fully exposed. Brett appeared in the hatchway, saw the laser gun directed at him, and ducked, shouting, "We've got the foil! Don't shoot!" Twisp noted blood down Brett's left side. Then... Sorry, I misread the comma there. Twisp noted blood down Brett's left side then, and felt his stomach tighten. "You hurt?" "No, it's not me, but I think we killed this guy in here. Scudi's trying to help him." Brett shuddered. "He wouldn't stop. He came right at the harpoon." "Only one in there?" "Right, just the two of them. This is the foil Scudi and I stole." "Bushka," Twisp called, "practice your knots on this one." He heaved the unconscious merman across the coracle's motor box. Bushka crept aft. Sorry about that. Bushka crept aft, trailing a length of line from the bow. He looked fearful and kept well back of the merman. "Know him?" Twisp asked. "Cipher. Works for Gallow." Scudi appeared in the hatchway behind Brett. She looked pale, her dark eyes wide. "He's dead," she said. "He kept telling me I had to feed his body to the kelp." Her hands didn't know what to do with their smears of blood. "This one wouldn't give up either." Twisp looked to where Bushka was tying the limp merman's hands behind his back and then to his feet. "They're crazy." Twisp returned his attention to Scudi. She slipped a black-handled survival knife back into its sheath at her thigh. "How'd you get inside?" Twisp asked. "There's a diver's hatch on the other side," Brett said. "Scudi knows how to work it. We waited until that one stepped off into the boat before boarding. The pilot didn't suspect a thing until we were right behind him." Brett was talking fast, almost breathless. "Why'd he keep coming for me, Queets? He could see I had the harpoon." "He was stupid," Twisp said. "You weren't." He glanced at Scudi above him, then at her knife. She followed the direction of his gaze and said, "I didn't know if he was faking." "That one can take care of herself," Twisp thought. Bushka stood up from tying the merman. He looked the foil over approvingly. "We've got ourselves a machine." The merman on the deck beneath him stirred and muttered. "Kid!" Twisp used the command tone that Brett remembered so well from their days at sea. He responded without thinking. "Sir?" "You think we should move aboard the foil?" Brett flashed a wide grin. "Yes, sir. It's bigger, faster, more mobile, and more seaworthy. I certainly do think we should move aboard, sir." "Scudi, can we get my coracles aboard of her?" "The cargo hatch is plenty wide enough," she said, "and there's a winch." "Brett," Twisp said, "you and Scudi start moving our gear aboard. Iz and I'll just ask a few questions of this chunk of eel shit." "If you want to help the kids," Bushka said, "I can handle this one alone." He nudged the merman at his feet with a toe. Twisp studied Bushka for a couple of blinks, noting the new tone of assurance in the man's voice. Anger crawled across Bushka's face now, and it was directed at the captive. "Find out what he was looking for," Twisp said. "What was he doing out here?" Bushka nodded. Twisp took his boat's bow line and tied it to a foil strut below the boarding ladder. They began shifting gear, moving presently to the tow coracle. When both coracles were emptied, Twisp paused. He heard Brett and Scudi shifting gear aboard the foil. In the dozens of trips they'd made packing supplies, the two youngsters had touched, bumped against each other, or brushed together as often as appeared discreetly possible. Twisp felt good just watching them. Nothing in the world ever felt good as love, Twisp thought. Below Twisp, Bushka sat back on his heels, glaring at the captive merman.
You getting anything from 'em?
Twisp asked.
They've taken the Chief Justice.
Shit, Twisp snapped.
Let's haul that tow coracle aboard. Keep at 'em.
Even with the winch, it was sweaty work getting the first coracle aboard. Scudi opened a cargo compartment aft of the loading hatch, and the three of them wrestled the boat inside. They lashed it against the cleats in the walls. Scudi stepped out onto the loading dock, glanced behind her, and stiffened. "You'd better come out and look," she said. She was pale as a sun-washed cloud. Twisp hurried outside, followed by Brett. Bushka stood over the bound merman. The man was no longer lashed to the coracle's bow. The naked merman had been pulled to a hanging position, hung by the wrists, bound up behind his shoulder blades. His dive suit lay in ragged pieces about the deck, and his knees barely touched the floors. Bushka held a fish knife in his right hand, its slender tip directed at the merman's belly. The muscles of the captive's arms stood out red, but his thin drawn lips were white. His shoulders strained at their sockets. His penis was a shrunken stump of fear tucked against his pelvis.
All right, Twisp demanded. What's going on?
You wanted information, Bushka said. I'm getting information. Trying out a few tricks Zent bragged about.
Twisp squatted in the opening, suppressing feelings of revulsion.
That's so.
He kept his voice level. When Bushka turned, Twisp realized that this was not the whining castaway he had jerked out of the sea. This one talked slow and even. He did not take his eyes off the target.
He claims the kelp makes them immortal, Bushka said. They have to be fed to the kelp when they die. I told him we'd burn him and keep the ashes.
Take him off the cleat, Twisp said. You shouldn't treat a man that way. Haul him aboard here.
A sullen expression flitted across Bushka's face and was gone. He turned and cut the captive down. The merman flexed his arms behind his back, restoring circulation.
He says the kelp keeps your identity, all your memories, everything, Bushka said.
Scudi pulled Brett close and whispered, "That may be possible." Brett merely nodded, looking down at where Bushka had been torturing the captive. He found the thought of what Bushka had done revolting. Sensing Brett's reaction, Scudi said, "Do you think Iz would really have killed and burned him?" Brett swallowed in a dry throat. Honesty forced him to say, "I harpooned the guy in the foil. That was different. That one would have killed you. This one was tied and helpless." "I don't know," Brett said. "He scares me." Scudi said. The foil lurched slightly, and again. Something uncoiled into the sea behind them. "Net," Brett whispered. "Twisp cut it loose." And it broke his heart, he thought. Fish dying for nothing always breaks his heart. A chill wind passed over them, and they both looked up. Thin clouds had begun a drift in from the north, and there was a light chop to the water where the kelp opened that strange lane. The lane still pointed them directly toward Vashon. "I thought it was going to stay hot," Brett said.
Wind's changed, Twisp said. Let's get this boat aboard. Vashon might be in for a bad time after all.
They secured the boat, sealed the hatch, and joined Scudi and Bushka in the pilot house. Scudi took the command chair, with Bushka standing to one side, flexing his fingers. Rage still seethed in Bushka's eyes. Twisp said, his voice low. "Would you really have cooked that merman alive?"
Every time I close my eyes, I see Guimes and Gallow.
Bushka glanced aft, where they had left the merman secured.
I'd be awfully sorry, I know, but...
He shrugged.
Not much of an answer.
I think I'd burn him, Bushka said.
That wouldn't help you sleep any better,
Twisp said. He nodded at Scudi.
Let's get this thing to Vashon.
Scudi fired up the ram and gently lifted the foil, onto its step. In a minute they were scudding along the kelp channel with a slight bouncing motion against the chop. Twisp directed Bushka to a couch at the rear of the pilot house. Sitting beside Bushka, Twisp asked, "Did he say how they captured Keel?"
Off another foil. They had 2 foils then.
"Where's Gallow?"
He's gone to Outpost 22 on the other foil, Bushka said. That's the rocket pickup station. He thinks there's an army in the Hybe tanks. Whoever opens them owns them. He wants control of both launch and recovery, and obviously he thinks he can get it.
"Is it possible?"
An army in the Hybe tanks? Bushka snorted. Anything's possible. They could come out shooting for all we know.
"What does he want with Keel?"
Trade. For Vata. He wants Vata. Gallow's crazy, Brett blurted. I've been down center and seen the Vata support system. It's big. They couldn't possibly. Cut out the whole support complex with a sub, Bushka said. Seal it off, tow it out. They could do it. They'd need doctors. They have their doctor, Bushka said. When they snatched Keel, they picked up Kareen Ale. Gallow's covering all angles.
Silence came over the pilot cabin while the ram pulsed around them. The foils slapped the seas in a well-absorbed rhythm. Twisp looked forward to Scudi in the pilot's seat. "Scudi, can we make radio contact with Vachon?"
Anyone could hear. She spoke without looking back.
Twisp shook his head once in frustrated indecision. Without warning, Bushka yanked the laser gun from Twisp's pocket and jammed it against his ribs. "Up!" Bushka snapped. Stunned, Twisp obeyed.
Very careful how you move, Bushka said. I know how strong you are.
Brett saw the laser gun in Bushka's hand.
What? Sit,
Bushka ordered. Brett sank back into the seat beside Scudi. She glanced aft, eyed the scene, and jerked her attention back to her course.
Whether we radio or take the message to Vachon in person, it's all the same, Bushka said. Gallow learns that his secret is out. But right now, we have the advantage of surprise. He thinks this is his foil.
What do you mean? Twisp asked.
Turn this foil around, Scudi, Bushka ordered. We're going after Gallow. I should have killed him when I had the chance.
Don't call me her father. I was nothing more than an instrument of Vata's conception. Father and daughter don't apply. Vata was born more than the sum of our parts. I caution the sons and the daughters after us. Remember that Vata is more mother to us than sister to you.
Caro Peniel, Family Papers. Sorry, Caro Peniel. You flip the R or roll the R. Shadow Peniel stood in the gloom of current control, thinking that at last he had found the woman of his life. With Kareen Ale, he had the faith that only merman normal offspring could evidence. Current control was aswarm with work, the usual routines preempted by the impending launch and the code yellow grounding of Vachon. Too many people working too hard for too long, he muttered to himself. Impulses moved out into the kelp from current control. Signals of drift sensors flashed in their cobalt blue numerals. LTA reports were rolling on the number 6 screen. Wouldn't get me up in one of those things, he thought. Lighter than air craft challenged a medium where unstable currents and the unforeseen were standard issue. Air was much more dangerous than water. Safest down under, he thought. Safety had taken on a new attraction to him. He wanted to live to spend more time with this woman. Where is Kareen right now? He found himself facing this question constantly since their separation. By now she would be at launch base. Peniel didn't like to think of the distance separating them. Distance was time, and after that last night he didn't want to spend any time without her. His head had ached and he had been dizzy with fatigue, but still sleep had not come. Every time his eyelids slipped, his head filled with visions of Guimi's survivors littering the triage floor. Torn flesh, blood, moans, and whimpers still ghosted around him in the dim bustle of current control. Kareen, too, had been drained of energy. They had gone to her quarters with little discussion, each aware only of the need to be together, alive after wading through all that death. They had walked from the tube station holding hands. Peniel had held himself under tight control, sure that a white-tipped anger might explode if he once relaxed. Something hot and twisting clenched his guts. Where Plaz lined the corridors, the ripple effect of surface light combined with the cadence of their steps to mesmerize Peniel into a dreamy detachment. He felt that he floated above himself, watching their swaying progress. There was tenderness in the arms, the bone-weary arms, and in Kareen's cheek as it brushed his shoulder. Her muscles worked their smooth magic, and he no longer suspected that she might try to rule him with her body. At her quarters, Peniel had stared out at a different kind of undersea, a garden lush with ferns waving and butterfly fish grooming the leaves. A thick column of kelp spiraled upward out there, twisting and untwisting with some distant surge. No death here, no signs of the Guimi's disaster. Just at the edge of visibility lay the blue reef with corridors of pale blue vine tulips that opened and closed like small mouths beyond the Plaz. Bright orange flashes of minuscule shrimp darted in and out, feeding on the vine tulip stamens. Kareen led him to her bedroom. They did not hesitate. Kareen stood tiptoe and pressed her mouth against his. Her open eyes watched his eyes, and he saw himself reflected in her black pupils. Her hands pressed at first against his chest, then slipped around his neck and unfastened his braid. Her fingers felt strong and sure. Surgeon's fingers, he thought. His black hair spread over his shoulders. Peniel brought his hands down from her shoulders to her tunic, releasing it clasp by clasp. They undressed each other slowly, wordlessly. When she stepped out of her underwear, the light caught and danced in the flaming red triangle of her hair. Her nipples pressed like children's noses against his ribs. "We've decided to live," he thought. The vision of Kareen Ale was a mantra that shut out all doubts about his world. Nothing existed in memory except the two of them and their perfectly complementary bodies. As they had started slipping into sleep, Kareen startled them both with a sudden cry. She clung to him then like a child. "Bad dreams," she whispered. "Bad reality is worse. Dreams are real while you're in them," she said. "You know, every time I think of us, the bad goes away. We heal each other." Her words and the pressure of her against him stirred Peniel fully awake. Kareen sighed, rolled astride him in one smooth movement, and gripped him deep inside her. Her breasts brushed his chest as they swayed back and forth. His breath was her breath then, and she called out his name as she collapsed, gasping, against him. Peniel held her gently, stroking her back. "Kareen," he said. "I like to say your name." He remembered this as he stood watch in current control and murmured her name under his breath. It helped. The main entry hatch to current control behind Peniel swung open with a sharp hiss, indicating quick entry without waiting for the outer lock to seal. Surprised, Peniel started to turn and felt hard metal pressed against his back. A downward glance showed him a laser gun against his flesh. Peniel recognized the man holding it. Gulf Nakano, Gallow's man. Nakano's bulky form stepped clear of the entryway, pushing Peniel ahead of him. Nakano was followed by three other mermen, all dive-suited, all armed, and all thin-lipped serious. "What is this?" Peniel demanded. "Shh!" Nakano hissed. He motioned the others around him. Then,
All right, everybody stand up.
Peniel watched the other intruders move swiftly, methodically to equidistant positions near the center of the room. One operator protested and was clubbed to the deck. Peniel started to speak, but Nakano thrust a huge palm against his mouth, saying,
Stay alive, Peniel. It's better.
The three attackers set their laser guns on short flame and began demolishing current control. Plas melted and popped, control boards sizzled. Small black snakes of vinyl precipitated out of the air. Everything was done with a chilling deliberation. In less than a minute it was all over, and Peniel knew they would be at least a year replacing this brain. He was outraged, but the destruction daunted him. His assistants leaned against one wall, shock and fear in their eyes. One woman knelt over the downed operator, dabbing at the side of his face with a corner of her blouse.
We have Kareen, Ollie, Nakano said. I'm told that would interest you.
Peniel felt his chest tighten.
Your cooperation ensures her safety, Nakano said. You ought to come with us on a litter as a casualty we're transporting for the medics.
Where are we going?
That's not your concern. Just tell me whether you will come quietly.
Peniel swallowed, then nodded.
We're welding the inner hatch closed as we leave, Nakano said. Everyone here will be safe. When the next shift tries to get in, you'll get out.
One of the mermen stepped forward.
Nakano, he whispered past Peniel. Gallow said we should... Shut up, Nakano said. I'm here and he's not. The next shift doesn't come in for at least 4 hours.
At Nakano's nod, two of his men brought an emergency litter from the space between the hatches. Peniel lay on the litter and was strapped to it. A blanket was tucked around him.
This is a medical emergency, Nakano said. We hurry, but don't run. Carry him through all hatchways head first. Peniel, you close your eyes. You're unconscious, and I want you to stay that way or I'll make it real.
I understand.
We don't want anything nasty happening to the lady.
This thought haunted Peniel as they maneuvered through the hatchways and corridor. Why me? Peniel couldn't imagine being that important to Gallow. They stopped at a transport tube and Nakano tapped out the emergency code. The next car stopped and half a dozen curious faces peered out at Peniel's form on the litter.
Quarantine, Nakano said, his voice curt. Everybody out. Don't get too close.
What's he got? One woman asked. She skirted the litter widely.
Something new picked up from the mutes, Nakano said. We're getting him out of core. This car'll be sterilized.
The car emptied quickly, and Peniel's bearers hustled him inside. The doors snicked closed, and Nakano chuckled.
Every sniffle, every ache and pain will have sick bay crowded for days.
Why all this rush? Peniel asked. And why cut current control?
Launch countdown has been resumed now that Guimi's matter is over. Medical emergency guarantees us a fast non-stop trip. The rest? Trade secrets.
What does the launch have to do with us?
Everything, Nakano said. We're headed for Outpost 22, the recovery station with the IB tanks.
Peniel felt the hot surge of adrenaline. Peniel felt the hot surge of adrenaline. The IB tanks. Why take me there? He asked.
We've set up a new current control. You're going to direct it.
I thought you were too smart to get caught up in Gallow's wake, Peniel said. A slow smile touched Nakano's heavy face.
We're gonna free hundreds, maybe thousands of humans in IB. We're gonna liberate the prison they've endured for thousands of years.
Peniel, strapped on the litter, could only look from Nakano to the three henchmen. All three wore the same bliss-ninny grins. People from the IB tanks? Peniel asked, his voice low.
Nakano nodded. Genetically clean, pure humans.
You don't know what's up there, Peniel said. Nobody knows. Gallow knows, Nakano said. There was hard belief in his voice, the kind of tone that indicates the necessity to believe. The transport capsule's overhead panel came to life, and a recorded male voice droned, "Lighter than air, Base Bravo loading facility." The hatches hissed open. Peniel's litter was picked up and carried out onto the loading platform with near-surface light trickling through heavy plas panels overhead. Peniel watched as much as he could through slitted eyelids. An LTA facility? He wondered. But they said we were... The truth dawned. They were going to fly him to the outpost. He almost opened his eyes, but restrained himself. Blowing it now would not bring him closer to Kareen. The litter moved with swift lurches, and Peniel heard Nakano's voice behind him. "Medical emergency! Clear the way!" Peniel's slitted eyes showed him the LTA gondola interior, a squashed sphere about 10 meters in diameter. It was nearly all plas, with a canopy of gray above the orange hydrogen bag. He found himself both excited and fearful, filled with confusion at this fierce activity. He heard the hatch seal behind him and Nakano's unruffled voice. "We made it. You can relax, Peniel. Everyone in here is secure." Peniel's straps were loosed, and he sat up. "Tether release in 2 minutes," the pilot reported. Peniel looked up at the orange canopy. The bag was a taper of pleats, its long folds hung down against the cabin's plas. Once they were up and clear of the tube, more hydrogen would flow into the bag and fill it out. He glanced right and left, saw the 2 hydrogen jets that would propel them once they were topside. The whine of a cable winch filled the gondola then. The pilot said, "Strap down, everyone. A bit rough up there today." Peniel found himself dragged backward into a seat beside Nakano. A strap was fitted around his waist. He kept his attention on the pilot. No one spoke. Switches clicked like the hard-shelled chatter of mollusks. "Topside hatch open," the pilot said, speaking into a microphone at his throat. A halo of white light filtered around the bag above them. The cabin lurched, and Peniel glanced out to his left, momentarily dizzy with the sensation that the gondola had stayed stationary and the launch tube was moving downward past him at increasing speed. The winch sound silenced The winch sound silenced abruptly, and he heard the hiss of the bag against the tube's walls. The bag cleared the tube then, and light washed the cabin. Peniel heard a gasp behind him, and then they were clear of the water, into a cloudy gray day, swaying beneath the expanding hydrogen bag. The jets swung out with a low whine and were ignited. The swaying motion of the gondola steadied. Almost immediately they entered a rain squall.
"Sorry, we won't be able to see the rocket launch because of this weather,"
the pilot said. He flicked a switch beside him, and a small screen on the panel in front came alight.
"We can watch the official coverage, though."
Peniel couldn't see from where he sat, and the pilot had the sound turned down. The gondola emerged from the rainstorm, still pelted by the runoff from the bag overhead. They began swaying wildly, and the pilot fought to control the motion. His flurried movement had little effect. Peniel noted with some satisfaction that the merman guards had green expressions that had nothing to do with their camouflage. "What's going on?" This was a woman's voice from behind Peniel, a voice he could not mistake. He froze, then slowly turned and stared past his captors. Kareen. She sat beside the entry hatch, where she had been hidden from him as he entered. Her face was very pale, her eyes dark shadows above her cheeks, and she did not meet his gaze. Peniel felt a hard emptiness in his stomach. "Kareen," he said. She did not respond. The gondola continued to lurch and sway. Nakano looked worried.
"What's going on, pilot?"
The pilot pointed to a display on the board to his right. Peniel tore his gaze away from Kareen Ale's ashen face. He could not see all that was indicated on the control panel, only the last two numbers of a digital display, and those were changing so rapidly they were a blur.
Our homing frequency, the pilot explained. It won't stay on target. We can't find the outpost without locking on the right frequency, Nakano said.
There was fear in his voice. The pilot withdrew his hand, and this revealed once more the display for the launch broadcast. The picture was gone, replaced by wave-like lines and pulsing colored ribbons.
Try your radio, Nakano ordered. Maybe they can tuck us in.
I am trying it, the pilot said. He flipped a switch and cranked up the volume control. A keening, rhythmic sound filled the gondola.
That's all I'm getting, the pilot said. Some kind of interference. Weird music.
Tones, Peniel murmured. Sounds like computer music.
What's that?
Peniel repeated it. He glanced back at Kareen. Why wouldn't she meet his eyes? She was very pale. Had they drugged her?
Our altimeter just went out, the pilot called. We're adrift. I'm taking us up above this weather.
He punched buttons and moved his controls. There was no apparent response from the LTA.
Damn!
The pilot swore. Peniel stared once more at the screen on the pilot's board. The pattern was familiar, though he wouldn't tell Nakano. It was a pattern Peniel knew he had seen on his own screens in current control. A Kelp response. It was what they saw when the Kelp complied with an instruction to shift the great currents in Pandora's Sea.
Give me 1 sec here. I was trying to change cover art, but I cannot find the one in question. That's not it. That's not it. That's not it. That's not it. This is embarrassing. Come on. It's going to be the last one I click on, I can tell. No, not you. There's one that was nicely opened up. Ah, frickadoodle. Windows is not cooperating. Okay, why isn't it cooperating is anybody's guess. File system error. Sure it is. Sure. No, not that one. Why does it keep freezing? This doesn't make any sense. Give me a minute here. There it is. Okay. Let's actually get you on there. Nope, not that one. That one. There we go. Finally. Sorry about that. It took way too long. Okay.
The repressed share the psychoses and the neuroses of the caged. As the caged run when released, the repressed explode when confronted with their condition.
Raja Thomas, The Journals. "17 Alki 468. In captivity at Outpost 22. Jealousy is a great teacher, if you allow it. Even the Chief Justice can learn much from his jealousy of mermen. Compared to mermen, we islanders live squalid lives. We are poor. There are no secrets among the poor. The squalor and close sweat of our lives oozes information and rumour. Even the most clandestine arrangements become public. But mermen thrive on secrecy. It is one of their many luxuries. Secrecy begins with privacy. As Chief Justice of the Committee on Vital Forms, I enjoy private quarters. No more stacked cubbies pressed head to foot along some rim-side bulkhead. No more feet stepping on hands in the night, or grunting lovers bumping against your back. Privilege and privacy, two words that share the same root. But down under, privacy is the norm. My imprisonment represents a special kind of privacy. These green dashers do not understand that. My captors appear exhausted and a little bored. Boredom opens paths into secrecy. Thus I anticipate learning something of their lives because their lives are now my life. How little they understand of true secrecy. They do not suspect the chanting in my head that records these things that I may share with others if I wish, and if I survive that long. These fanatics give no quarter. Guime's is proof that they can commit murder skilfully and easily, perhaps even cheerfully. I have few illusions about my chances here. Little can survive me except my record on the committee. I admit to a little pride about that record, and some regrets about my other choices. The child that Caroline and I should have had, she would have been a daughter, I think. By now there would be grandchildren. Did I have the right to prevent that generation out of fear? They would have been beautiful and wise, yes, like Caroline. Gallow wonders why I sit here with my eyelids opened only to slits. Sometimes he laughs at what he sees. Gallow dreams of dominating our world. In that he is no different from Scudi's father. Ryan Wang fed people to control them. Gelaar Gallow kills. Their other differences are just as profound. I suppose death is a form of absolute control. There are many kinds of death. I see this because I have no grandchildren. I have only those whose lives have passed through my hands, those who have survived because of my word. I wonder where Gallow sent that big assistant, Nakano. What a monster. On the outside. The very vision of a terrorist. But Nakano's goals are not on the surface. No one could call him transparent. His hands are gentle when there is no need for his great strength. They have suspended this foil beneath the surface. More secrecy, more privacy. Still, such stillness can be frightening. I am beginning to find it captivating. I see that my mind jokes with me in its choice of words. Privacy, too, is captivating. Islanders do not know this reality of life down under. They imagine only the privacy. They envy the privacy. They do not imagine the stillness. Will my people ever encounter this immense quiet? I find it difficult to believe that the CP will order all islanders to move down under. How could she do this? Where could the mermen put us and not lose their precious privacy? But even more than fear of ship, our envy would cause us to obey. But even more than fear of ship, our envy would cause us to obey. I cannot believe that ship enters into such a scheme except by innuendo, and the innuendo of ship suffers a sea of change in human interpretation. A moment's reflection back through the histories, especially upon the writings of that maverick CP, Raja Thomas, makes this as clear as Plas. Ah, Thomas, what a brilliant survivor you were! I thank ship that your thoughts have come down to me. For I, too, know what it is to be caged. I know what it is to be repressed. And I know myself better because of Thomas. Like him, I can turn to my memory for company, and he is there, too. Now, with Kelp to record us, no lock seals the hatchway to memory, ever. If you don't know about numbers, you can't appreciate coincidence. Scudi Wang. Brett marveled at Scudi's control. All during the ordeal in the control cabin, her attention remained on the operation of the foil. She kept them skimming along the edge of the kelp in the bright light of morning, avoiding stray tangles of leaves that might catch the struts. There were moments when Brett thought the kelp opened special channels for the foil. Directing them? Why would it do that? Scudi's eyes widened from time to time. What did she see in the kelp channels to cause that reaction? Her tan face paled at what she heard behind her where Twisp and Bushka argued, but she kept the foil cruising smoothly toward its rendezvous with Gallow. Her reaction was not natural, Brett thought. Bushka was crazy to think they could surprise Gallow and overcome him. Just the four of them here. Vachon had to learn what was happening. Scudi must realize this. Within an hour they came out of the heaviest kelp infestation onto open water where the seas were steeper and the motions of the foil more abrupt. Bushka sat alone on the command couch at the rear of the cabin, forcing Twisp to sit on the floor well away from him. Between them, trussed like a kelp-tangled dasher, their captive merman lay quiet. Occasionally he opened his eyes to study his surroundings. Twisp bided his time. Brett understood the big fisherman's silent waiting. There was a limited future arguing with a man holding a laser gun. Brett studied Scudi's profile, the way she kept her attention on the water ahead of them, the way she tensed when she corrected course. A muscle in her cheek trembled. "Are you all right?" Brett asked. Her knuckles whitened on the wheel, and the tremble disappeared. She looked childlike in that big seat with the spread of instruments around her. Scudi still wore her dive suit, and he could see a red irritation where it rubbed against her neck. This made him acutely conscious of the constrictions in his own suit. "Scudi?" She barely whispered. "I'm okay." She took a deep breath and relaxed against the padded seat. He saw the whiteness retreat from her knuckles. The foil lurched and shuddered along the wave tops, and Brett wondered how long it could take such punishment. Twisp and Bushka began a conversation too low for Brett to make out more than the occasional word. He glanced back at them and focused on the laser gun still held firmly in Bushka's hands. Its muzzle pointed in the general direction of Twisp and the merman. What was Bushka really doing? Was it only rage? Surely Bushka could never escape memories of his part in the Guimi's massacre. Killing Gallow wouldn't erase those memories, it would only add more. Scudi leaned toward Brett then and whispered, "It's going to be a bad storm." Brett jerked his attention around and looked out at the sweep of Plaz. Brett jerked his attention around and looked out the sweep of Plaz, aware for the first time that the weather was changing dramatically. A gusting wind from port had begun to blast the tops off the waves, whipping scuds of foam along the surface. A gray curtain of rain slanted into the sea ahead, closing the tenuous gap between black clouds and gray water. The day suddenly had the feel of cold metal. He glanced up at the position vector on the overhead screen and tried to estimate their time to Gallow and his hunt of green dashers. 2 hours? He asked. That's going to slow us. Scudi nodded toward the storm line ahead. Fasten your safety harness. Brett swung the shoulder strap across his chest and locked it in place. They were into the rain then. Visibility dropped to less than 100 meters. Great pelting drops roared on the foil's metal fabric and overcame the air blast wipers on the cabin Plaz. Scudi backed off the throttle, and the foil began to pitch even more with the steepening waves.
What's going on? Bushka demanded.
Storm, Scudi said. Look at it.
How soon will we get there? Bushka asked.
His voice had taken on a new note, Brett realized. Not exactly fear, anxiety, uncertainty. Bushka had the islanders' dreamlike admiration for foils, but really did not understand them. How would the foil survive a storm? Would they have to stop and submerge? I don't know how long, Scudi said. All I know is we're going to have to slow down more, and soon.
Don't waste any time, Bushka ordered.
It had grown darker in the cabin, and the wave action outside looked mean. Long, rolling combers with their tips curling white. They were still in kelp, though, with a broken channel through it. Scudi switched on the cabin lights and began paying more attention to the screens overhead and in front of her. Brett saw his own reflection in the Plaz, and it startled him. His thick blond hair fanned his head in a wild halo. His eyes were two dark holes staring back at him. The gray of the storm had become the gray of his eyes, almost dasher black. For the first time, he realized how close to merman normal he appeared. I could pass, he thought. He wondered then how much this fact figured in his attraction for Scudi. It was an abrupt and startling thought which made him feel both closer and more removed from her. They were islander and merman, and they always would be. Was it dangerous to think that they might pair? Scudi saw him staring toward the Plaz in front of them. Can you see anything? She asked. He knew immediately she was asking whether his mutant eyesight could help them now. Rain's just as bad for my eyes as it is for yours, he told her. Trust your instruments. We've got to slow down, she said, and if it gets much worse, we'll have to submerge. I've never... She broke off as a violent creaking shudder engulfed the foil, rattling the hardware until Brett thought the boat might split. Scudi immediately backed the throttle. The foil dropped off the step with an abrupt plowing motion that sent it sliding down a wave face and pitched it up the next one. Brett was hurled against his safety harness hard enough to take his breath away. Curses and scrambling noises came from behind him. He whirled and saw Bushka picking himself up off the deck, clutching the grabs beside the couch he had occupied. His right hand still gripped the las gun. Twisp had been dumped into a corner with the captive merman atop him. One long arm came out of the tangle, pushing the captive aside, finding a handhold and lifting himself to a standing position at the side of the cabin.
What's happening?
Bushka shouted. He shifted his grip to a handhold behind his couch and eased himself onto the cushions. We're into kelp, Scudi said. It's fouled the struts. I've had to retract them, but they're not coming fully back. Brett kept his attention on Bushka. The foil was riding easier, its jet only a low murmur far back in the stern. It was in Scudi's hands now, and he half suspected she had exaggerated the nature of their predicament. Bushka, too, looked undecided. His large head bobbed in the constant motion of the foil as he tried to peer past Scudi at the storm. Brett was suddenly struck by how merman-like Bushka appeared, powerful shoulders tapering to sinewy, almost delicate hands. The assault of the wind and waves against the hull increased. There's a heavy kelp bed in our path, Scudi said. It shouldn't be here. I think it may have broken loose in the storm. We don't dare go up on the step again.
What can we do?
Bushka demanded. First we'll have to clear the struts so I can retract them, she said. Hull integrity is vital for control, especially if we have to submerge.
Why can't we just clear the struts and go back up on the foils? Bushka asked. We have to get to the outpost before Gallow suspects.
Lose a strut at high speed? Very bad, Scudi said. She gestured at the captive merman. Ask him. Bushka looked at the man on the deck.
What does it matter? The merman shrugged. If we die in kelp, we are immortal.
I think he just agreed with you, Twisp said. So, how do we clear the struts? We go out and do it by hand, Scudi said. In this? Twisp looked out at the long, white-capped rollers, the gray bleakness of the storm. The foil rode the waves like a chip, quartering into them and twisting at every crest when the wind hit it with full force. "We will use safety lines," Scudi said. "I have done it before." She hit the crossover switch to activate Brett's controls. "You take it, Brett. Watch out at the crests. The wind wants to take it, and the struts being half out that way makes it hard to control." Brett gripped the wheel, feeling perspiration slippery against his palms. Scudi released her safety harness and stood, holding fast to her seat back against the roll and pitch of the foil. "Who's going to help me?"
"I will," Twisp said. "You'll have to tell me what to do."
Just a minute,
Bushka snapped. He studied Twisp and Scudi for a long blink.
you know what happens to the kid if you cause me any trouble.
"You learn very fast from this man Gallow," Twisp said. "Are you sure he's your enemy?"
Bushka paled with anger, but remained silent. Twisp shrugged and made his way along overhead grabs. Twisp shrugged and made his way along overhead grabs to the rear hatch.
"Scudi?"
"All right." She turned to Brett. "Hold it steady as you can. It's going to be rough out there." "Maybe I'm the one who should go with you." "No. Twisp has no experience handling a foil." "Then he and I could—" "Neither of you knows how to clear the struts. This is the only way. We will be careful." Abruptly she leaned down and kissed his cheek, whispering, "It is all right." Brett was left with a warm sense of completeness. He felt he knew exactly what to do at the foil's controls. Bushka checked the merman's restraints, then joined Brett at the controls. He took Scudi's seat. Brett only spared the slightest glance for him, noting the laser gun still at the ready. Heavy seas swept them steadily sideways at every crest, and the foil barely had enough headway to recover. Brett listened to voices out on the deck, Scudi shouting to Twisp. A steep swell broke over the cabin, then another. Two long rollers swept under them, then one more breaking crest curled over the Plaz. The foil stood almost vertical on its stern, slapped back into the trough, and the crest crashed onto the cabin top. The boat shuddered and wallowed in a side slip while Brett fought to bring its nose back into the weather. Twisp shouted something. Abruptly, his voice came crying up the passage.
"Brett! Circle port! Scudi's lost her safety line!"
Without any thought for whether the foil could take it, Brett cranked the wheel hard left and held it. The boat turned on a crest, slipped sideways down a wave, lifted at the stern, and water washed down the long passage into the cabin. It swirled around their feet, lifting the captive and sending him against Bushka's thigh. The foil almost rolled over on the next wave. It came up broadside to the weather as it continued its mad circle. Brett felt the sea slosh through the cabin and realized that Twisp had opened the rear hatch to be heard. "Get her," Brett prayed. He wanted to abandon the wheel and run back to help, but he knew he had to keep the foil tight in this pattern. Twisp was experienced. He would know what to do. A wave in the cabin broke almost up to his waist, and Bushka cursed. Brett saw that Bushka was struggling to keep the merman in one place. Brett's mind kept repeating, "Scudi, Scudi, Scudi." The storm's roar in the cabin diminished slightly, and Bushka shouted,
He's closed the hatch.
"Help them, Bushka!" Brett hollered. "Do something for once!" The foil lifted once more over a crest, rolled heavily with the weight of the water they'd taken on.
No need, Bushka shouted. He has her.
"Get back on course." It was Twisp's voice behind Brett, but Brett dared not turn. "I have her, and she's all right." Brett swung the foil's bow back into the seas, quartering into a high comber that rolled over them at the crest. Water sloshed through the cabin as the foil pitched down into the next trough. The sound of pumps chuffing below decks came clearly to Brett's ears. He risked a glance back and saw Twisp backing into the cabin, Scudi's limp form over his shoulder. He dogged the hatch behind him and dumped Scudi on the couch where Bushka had been. "She's breathing," Twisp said. He bent over Scudi, a hand on her neck. "Pulse is strong. She hit her head on the hull as we tipped."
Did you clear the struts?
Bushka demanded.
Eel shit,
Twisp spat.
Did you?
Yes, we cleared the damn struts.
Brett looked at the overhead screen and brought the foil around 10 degrees, putting down a surge of rage against Bushka. But Bushka was suddenly busy with the keyboard at his position.
Finding how to retract these foils. That was the whole idea, wasn't it?
Bushka's fingers flurried over the keys, and a schematic appeared on the screen in front of him. He studied it a moment and manipulated controls at his side of the board. Within blinks, Brett heard the hiss and clunk of struts retracting.
You're not on course,
Bushka said. As close as I can be, Brett said. We have to quarter these seas or we'll pound ourselves to pieces.
If you're lying, you're dead,
Bushka said. You take it if you know better than I do, Brett said. He lifted his hands from the wheel. Bushka brought the lasgun up and pointed it at Brett's head.
Steer us the way you have to, but don't give me any shit.
Brett dropped his hands onto the wheel in time to catch the next crest. They were riding easier now. A green light showed at the foil's retracted marker. Bushka swiveled his seat and hunched down, positioning himself to watch both Brett and Twisp. The captive merman lay beside Bushka, his face pale, but he was breathing.
We're still going after Gallow,
Bushka said. There was a note of hysteria in his voice. Twisp strapped Scudi into the couch and sat beside her. He held a grab near her head for balance. Twisp looked forward past Bushka, then up at the overhead display.
What's that?
He asked, nodding at the screen. Bushka did not turn. Brett glanced up at the screen. A green, diamond-shaped marker flashed near the course line and off to the right.
What is it?
Twisp repeated. Brett leaned forward and punched the identity key under the screen. Outpost 22 flashed on the screen beside the diamond. That's the pickup station for the Hybe tanks, Brett said. That's where Gallow's supposed to be. Scudi's brought us out right on target.
Get us in there,
Bushka ordered. Brett turned onto the new heading while he tried to recall everything Scudi had told him about the Hybe tank recovery project. There wasn't much.
Why's it flashing?
Twisp asked. I think it does that when you get within range, Brett said. I think it's a warning that we're getting close to the shallows around the outpost.
You think?
Bushka snarled. I don't know this equipment any better than you do, Brett countered. Take over any time you want.
Throw some water on that woman. Get her awake,
Bushka ordered. Again that note of hysteria in his voice. He brought the lasgun around until it pointed at Brett.
You stay put back there, Twisp, Bushka ordered, or the kid gets burned.
With his free hand, Bushka began working the keyboard in front of him.
Incompetence, he muttered. Everything's right here if you just ask for it.
Chart reading instructions scrolled upward on his screen. Bushka bent to read them.
Ship's balls!
Twisp shouted.
What's that?
Through the spray-drenched plaz ahead and to his left, Brett saw a great splash of bright orange, something floating a wave out there. I think it's supposed to say something floating on a wave? Something floating a wave out there. He bent forward to peer through the salted plaz. It was a long orange something that stretched into the anonymous gray of the storm. Kelp lay tangled all around it. The foil was coming up on the orange thing fast, bringing it close to their port side.
It's an LTA bag, Bushka said. Somebody's gone down.
Can you see the gondola? Twisp asked. Brett, stay downwind from it. The bag'll act like a sea anchor. Don't get fouled in it. Brett swung the foil to the left, and it wallowed in a trough, rocking dangerously at the crest, then into the next trough. At the following crest he saw the gondola, a dark shape awash in the long seas. The orange bag trailed out behind it with kelp laced across it. The gondola was coming up on their right. The seas were smoother there, flattened by the great spread of the bag. Another crest, and Brett saw faces pressed against the gondola's plaza. "There are people in there!" Twisp shouted. "I saw faces!" "Damn!" Bushka said. "Damn, damn, damn!" "We have to take them off," Brett said. "We can't leave them there." "I know that!" Bushka snarled. Scudi took this moment to begin muttering, words Brett couldn't understand. "She's all right," Twisp said. "She's coming out of it. Bushka, you come back here and look after her while I get a line aboard that gondola." "How are you going to do that?" Bushka asked. "I'm going to swim it over. What else? Brett, hold her steady as you can right here." "They're mermen," Bushka said. "Why can't they bring a line to us?" "The minute they open their hatch, that gondola is going down," Twisp said. "It'll feel like a punctured float." Scudi's voice came clearly then.
What's happening?"
Bushka released his safety harness and made his way back to her. Brett heard the hatch open and close. Bushka's voice, quite low, gave Scudi her answer.
"An LTA?" she asked. "Where are we?"
"Near Outpost 22.
There was a scuffling sound, and Bushka's voice.
"Stay down there."
Oh, I think it's her talking now.
"I have to get to the controls. It's shallow here, very shallow. In these seas—"
"All right," Bushka said. "Do what you have to do."
Scuffing footsteps on the deck, then water sloshing from a wet dive suit. Scudi's hand gripped Brett's shoulder.
"Damn it, but my head hurts," she said.
Her hand touched his cheek, and he felt a flash of pain on the side of his temple. It was a throbbing pain, as though something had struck him there. Scudi leaned across him, her hand over his shoulder to steady herself. Their cheeks touched. Brett felt something flow between them, creating a moment of panic followed by a sudden inrush of awareness. His neck hair prickled as he realized what had happened. He felt that he was two people become one, but aware of the separation. One person standing beside the other.
"I'm seeing with Scudi's eyes."
Brett's hands moved automatically on the wheel, a new expertise he had not known he possessed. The foil gentled its way close to the gondola and hung there with just enough headway to counteract the wind.
"What's happening to us?"
The words formed silently in their minds, a simultaneous question, shared in an instant and answered in an instant.
"The kelp has changed us. We share our senses when we touch."
With this odd double vision, Brett saw Twisp swimming now, moving through a channel in the kelp and very close to the gondola. Faces peered out through the plaza. Brett thought he recognized one of those faces, and, with that recognition, came a bursting daydream, instantaneous, a sense of people talking inside the gondola. The sensation vanished, and he was left staring at white-whipped waves breaking across the LTA. Twisp clinging there while he fastened his line to a hand grab beside the plaza lock.
Scudi whispered to Brett, "Did you hear them talking?" "I couldn't make out the words." "I could. Gallow's people are in there and they have prisoners. The prisoners are being taken to Gallow." "Where is Gallow? Here?" "I think so, but I recognized a prisoner. It's Dark Penil, Shadow. I've worked with him." "The man who treated me in the passageway?" "Yes, and one of the captors is that Gulf Nakano. I'm going to warn Bushka. He has the weapon. We will have to lock them into one of the cargo bays."
Scudi turned away and worked her way back to Bushka, steadying herself along the overhead grabs. Brett heard her explain the situation to Bushka, saying she had recognized Nakano through the gondola's plaza.
"They've opened their hatch," Brett said. "People are coming out. I see Shadow. There's Nakano. Waves are slopping into the hatch. Everybody's coming out."
Scudi slipped into the command seat beside Brett.
"I'll take it. You help Bushka at the entry hatch."
"No tricks!"
Bushka yelled as he followed Brett down the passageway.
"We've got to get Twisp out of there."
Brett said. He's staying at the gondola to unfasten the line when it goes under.
They were at the hatchway then, wind whipping around them and spray in their eyes. Brett was thankful for his dive suit. In spite of the chill, sweat poured from his body. The muscles of his arms and legs were tightly humming bands. A wave broke against the hull below them. Brett sighted along the line. A long row of bobbing heads worked their way toward the foil. He recognized Nakano in the lead, staying close to Peniel. The line snaked up and down the waves.
We'll bring them aboard one at a time, right into the cargo bay behind me,
Bushka said. We'll have to disarm them. Nakano was first through the hatch. His face had the single-minded aggressiveness of a bull dasher. Bushka leveled the laser gun from the far side of the hatchway, slipped a similar weapon from the thigh pocket of Nakano's dive suit, grabbed a knife from Nakano's waist sheath, and motioned with his head for the merman to enter the open hatch to the cargo bay. For a blink, Brett thought Nakano would attack Bushka despite the laser gun, but the man shrugged and ducked through into the bay. Peniel stayed down below to help others, and the next person through was a woman, red-haired, beautiful.
Kareen Ale, Bushka said. Well, well.
He sent his gaze licking over her body, saw no weapon, and nodded toward the cargo hatch.
In there, please.
She stared at the laser gun in Bushka's grip.
Do it!
A shout from below the hatch brought Brett whirling around to face the sea.
What is it?
Bushka demanded. He was trying to divide his attention between the open cargo hatch and the outer hatch where survivors still waited to be brought aboard. Brett peered out across Peniel, who hung below the hatch with an arm wrapped through a loop in his safety line. The gondola beyond him had begun to sink, slowly dragging the orange LTA bag under the waves. The safety line lay across the waves with Twisp pulling himself along it. Something was happening about midway along the line, though, and Brett tried to make out what had caused the shout.
What's happening?
Bushka asked. I don't know. There's a length of kelp across the line. Twisp released the line from the gondola and it's already under. But something's... A human hand came out of the water near the kelp, and 2 kelp strands whipped across the hand, and the hand vanished. Twisp reached the kelp barrier and hesitated there. A questing strand of kelp touched his head, paused there, and withdrew. Twisp continued his way along the line, stopping finally beside Peniel, exhausted. Peniel put an arm under Twisp's shoulder and helped support him. Waves lifted both men and lowered them beside the foil. Shall I help bring him up? Brett called. Twisp waved a hand to stop him. I'll be all right. One of his long arms snaked up the line and took a firm grip. 2 people, Twisp said. The kelp took 'em. It just took them, wrapped around them and took them. He hauled himself up the line, quivering every muscle on the way. He slumped through the hatch, then turned to help Peniel. Bushka waved Peniel toward the cargo bay. No, Brett said. He stepped between Bushka and Peniel. Shadow was a prisoner. He helped me. He's not one of them.
Who says?
The kelp says, Twisp said. Control the religion and the food, and we own the world. Gelaar Gallow. Vata's growing restlessness sloshed nutrient over the rim of her tank. At times she arched her back as if in pain, and the pink knobs of her nipples broke the surface like the bright peaks of 2 blue-green mountains. A relief attendant, an islander high on boo, reached out to tweak one of the gnarled, vein-swollen things and was discovered catatonic, his blasphemous thumb and forefinger still held in position over the vat. This event redoubled CP Simone Roxack's efforts to effect the islander move down under. Stories of the Wrath of Vata circulated freely, and no one on the CP's staff made any effort to sort fact from fantasy. Rocksack silenced one underling who objected to the rumors by saying,
A lie is not a lie if it serves a higher mortal purpose. Then it is a gift.
Vata herself, locked inside her tank and her skull, while generation after generation of her people evolved around her, explored her world with the tender new frond tips of the kelp. Kelp was fingertip and ear to her, nose and eye and tongue. Where massive stalks lazed on the sea's bright surface, she witnessed pastel sunrises, the passage of boats and islands, the occasional ravages of a hunt of dashers. Scrubberfish that cleaned the kelp's broadest leaves whiskered the deep crevices of her opulent flesh. Crevasses. Sorry, it is not crevices. Crevasses. Scrubberfish that cleaned the kelp's broadest leaves whiskered the deep crevasses of her opulent flesh. Like herself, the kelp was single, incomplete, unable to reproduce. Mermen took cuttings, rooted them in rock and mud. Storms ripped whole vines loose from the mother plant, and some of the wounded stragglers wedged safely into rock and grew there. For 2.5 centuries, at least, the kelp had not bloomed. No highlighter broke the surface of the sea to rise on its hydrogen bag and scatter its fresh spores to the winds. Sometimes in her sleep Vata's loins pulsed with an ancient rhythm, and a sweet emptiness ached in her abdomen. These were the times she curled close to Duque, her massive body engulfing him in a frustrating approximation of an embrace. Now her frustration focused on Gelaar Gallow. A jungle of kelp strained each strand to reach the walls and hatchways of Outpost 22, with no success. The perimeter was too wide, the stalks too short. New pairs of eyes joined the kelp to reveal Gallow's treachery. The clearest of these eyes belonged to Scudi Wang. Vata enjoyed the company of Scudi Wang, and it became more difficult to let her go each time they met. Vata met Scudi in the kelp. A few bright glimpses of a fresh young mind, and she searched for Scudi daily. When Vata dreamed the terrors of kelp, storm-ripped from its ballast rock and dying, the touch of Scudi's skin on vine or frond smoothed those churning dreams to a warm calm. Those times Vata, in turn, dreamed back to Scudi. She dreamed small histories, images, and visions to keep the fear of kelp madness out of Scudi's head. Vata had dreamed to others who had never come out of the dream. She knew now that Scudi's mother was one of those lost dreamers. Stunned by the hot dream sparking into her from the kelp, the woman had floated wide-eyed and helpless into a passing net. The tender airfish at her neck was crushed, and she drowned. And the merman crew supporting her had made no move to rescue her. Deliberate. Vata watched the strange odyssey that worked its way back toward Outpost 22. She flexed her kelp when the gondola went down and acquainted herself with Bushka and Shadow Peniel. This Peniel, he was blood to her. Brother, she thought, and marveled over the word. She trusted Bushka and Peniel to Scudi's presence. The message she sent Scudi was simple and clear. Find Gallow, drive him out. Kelp will do the rest.
Life is not an option, it is a gift. Death is the option.
Ward Keel, Journal. It was late evening, but Ward Keel had lost all inclination to sleep. He accepted the buzz of fatigue as a logical consequence of captivity. His eyes refused to stay focused. They blinked slowly, and he glimpsed the brush of his long lashes in the plaz beside him. His brown eye faced itself in the plaz. It was a small, dark blur. Beyond it lay the perimeter of kelp, almost gray at this depth. His prison cubby was warm, warmer even than his quarters on Vachon, but the grey of down under washed his psyche cold. Keel had been watching the Kelp for hours as Gallow's men streamed into the outpost. At first the Kelp pulsed as usual with the current. Fronds waved at full extension down current like a woman's long hair in an evening breeze. Now there was a different rhythm, and the larger kelp fronds down current of the outpost stretched directly toward Keel. The currents were no longer consistent. The outpost was being battered by sudden changes of current that had the kelp outside flickering in a firelight dance. Gallow's morning crew had never arrived. His medical team was lost. Keel could hear Gallow's rantings from the next room. The syrupy voice was cracking. Something strange about that kelp, Keel thought. Stranger than moving against the current. Keel never even considered that Brett and Scudi might be dead. In the reverie generated by the gentle undulations of the kelp, Keel thought often about his young friends. Had they reached Vachon? He was worried about that. But he heard no echoes of this in Gallow's angry words. Surely Gallow would be reacting if that message had reached Vachon.
Gelaar Gallow is attempting to take over Merman Mercantile and the recovery of the Hybe tanks. Merman rockets are being sent into space for the tanks. Mermen are changing our planet in ways islands cannot survive. If Gallow succeeds, islanders are doomed.
How would the CP react? Keel wondered. He might never know. Keel held out little hope for himself. His gut had begun to burn again, precisely as it had 4 years ago. He knew that all traces of the remora were gone. Without it, the food he ate would pass undigested, and his intestines would gnaw at themselves until he either bled to death or starved. There was no reason to doubt the word of his personal physician, and the evidence was too painfully immediate to disguise, even to himself.
It used to make me tired all the time, he thought. Why won't it let me sleep now?
Because last time he'd almost bled to death in his sleep, and now sleep was impossible. It wasn't the constant burning that kept him awake. Pain he had learned to bear over the years of ill-fitting support devices for his long neck. This was the crisp wakefulness of the condemned. Wakefulness had brought Keel's attention to the kelp. Sometime in mid-morning the kelp stalks began defying the currents and reaching toward the outpost. The perimeter of growth began about 200 meters from the outpost walls. The outpost itself lay in the center of this massive kelp project like a jewel in a fat ring. The fish were gone, too. Keel's few earlier glimpses of the outer compound had shown a richness of fishes that rivaled the gardens at Kor. Fan-like butterfly fish with iridescent tails, the ever-present scrubberfish grazing leaves and plaids, mud devils raising and lowering the tall sails of their dorsal fins with every disturbance. None was visible now, and the gray filter of evening quickly washed itself black. Just the kelp remained, sole proprietor of the world beyond the outpost's perimeter. This day Keel felt that he had watched the kelp go from graceful to stately to full alert.
That's my translation, he reminded himself. Don't attribute humanity to other creatures. It limits study.
A quick shudder iced his spine when he realized that this kelp had been grown from cells carried by mutant humans. The kelp had an infinite memory. The histories said that, but so did Gelaar Gallow.
Conclusion?
He asked himself.
It's waking up, he answered, and it absorbs the memories of the living and the newly dead.
Therein lay great temptation for Ward Keel.
I could leave more than scratchings in these journals, he thought. I could leave everything. Everything! Think of that!
He entered these thoughts into his journal, and wished that he had his journals and his life's collection of notes around him now. It was possible, he knew for fact, that no islander had given more direct thought to life and life forms than Justice Keel. Some of these observations he knew to be unique, sometimes illogical, but vital every one. These data he hated to see lost when a struggling humanity needed them so very much.
Someone else will think those thoughts in time, if there is more time.
His attention was caught by the arrival of another sub overhead. The sub gave the kelp a wide berth. Gallow's orders. As the sub disappeared on its way to the interior docking bay, Keel marveled at the movement of the kelp. Huge stalks tracked the sub's path even though it came in against the current. Like a blossom following the slow arc of sunlight across the sky, the kelp followed all of the incoming mermen. An occasional blur of gray moved among the tendrils as one snapped out suddenly toward an intruder, but all mermen kept well out of reach.
If the kelp is waking, he thought, the future of all the humans left may be at stake.
Perhaps after contacting enough humans, the kelp would find some way of saying, "Like me. If you're human, you're like me." There was a biological kinship, after all. Keel swallowed and hoped silently that it was true that Vata was the key to the kelp. He hoped, too, that mercy was a part of Vata's personality. Keel thought he detected a change in the perimeter. It was hard to tell, with night coming on and visibility so poor anyway, but he was sure that the 200-meter perimeter had closed. Not much, but enough to notice. Keel cast about in his memory for all the information that he'd ever stored on the kelp. Sentient, capable of nonverbal communication by touch, firmly anchored to ballast rocks and mobile in its bloom state, except the bloom state had been extinct for hundreds of years. That was the kelp the first humans on Pandora destroyed. What surprises lay in store with this new kelp? This creature had been regrown from gene prints present in human carriers. Could it be that the kelp has learned how to move? It didn't feel like a trick of the imagination. The dark outside was now nearly total. Only a thin barrier of light escaped from the outpost itself.
Morning will tell, he thought, if there is a morning.
He chuckled to himself. With most of his world gone dark, Keel was left staring at himself in the port, haloed by the glare of the one bare light. He moved away from the Plaz after a passing glance at his nose. It spread over his face like a mashed fruit. The tip touched his upper lip whenever he pursed his mouth in thought. The hatch door behind him slammed into a wall and startled him. His stomach took a bad turn, then turned again when he saw Gallow, alone, carrying 2 liters of Islander wine.
Mr. Justice, Gallow said, I thought I'd liberate these from the men. I present them to you as a gesture of hospitality.
Keel noted that the label showed that the wine was from Vashon, not Guimes, and breathed easier.
Thank you, Mr. Gallow,
he said. He allowed his head to drop in a slight bow.
I seldom have the pleasure of a good wine any more. Sour stomach comes with age, they say.
Keel sat heavily and indicated the other chair next to his bunk.
Have a seat. Cups are on the sideboard.
Good. Gallow flashed the wide, white smile that Keel was sure opened many a reluctant hatch.
And many a lady, he thought.
He shook it off, suddenly embarrassed by himself. Gallow took 2 stoneware cups from a shelf and set them on the desk. The handles, Keel noted, were thick to accommodate the calloused fingers of outpost riders. Gallow poured, but did not sit.
I have ordered supper for us, Gallow said. One of my men is a passable cook. The outpost is crowded, so I took the liberty of ordering the meal delivered here. I hope that meets your approval. How very polite, Keel thought. What does he want?
He took a cup of the amber wine. Both lifted cups, but Keel only sipped.
Pleasant,
Keel said. His stomach churned with bitter wine and the thought of lumps of hot food. It churned at the prospect of listening to more of Gallow's egocentric prattle.
Cheers, Gallow said, and to the health of your children.
It was a traditional islander toast that Keel acknowledged with a raised eyebrow. Several acid replies teased the tip of his tongue, but he bit them back.
You islanders have mastered the grape, Gallow said. Everything we have down under tastes like formaldehyde.
The grape needs weather, Keel said, not racks of lamps. That's why each season has its own distinct flavor. You taste the story of the grape. Formaldehyde is an accurate summation of conditions down under from the grape's point of view. That touches on the concept of terroir, 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 the story of the land, which we touched on in the Area X trilogy. So it would be that kind of a meeting. Keel had heard these conversations before, the justifications of men and women in power for their abuse of that power. He imagined that many a condemned man had to listen to the guilty prattle of his jailer. Right is self-evident, Keel said. It needs no defense, just good witness. What is it that you come here for?
I come here for a conversation, Mr. Justice,
Gallow said. He brushed a stray shock of blond hair back from his forehead.
Conversation, dialogue, whatever you might call it. It's not readily available among my men.
You must have leaders, officers of some sort. Why not them?
You find this curious, perhaps a bit frightening, that the one privacy of your imprisonment is breached here? At your ease, Mr. Justice. Conversation is all I'm after. My men grunt, my officers plan, my enemies plot. My prisoner thinks, or he wouldn't keep a journal, and I admire anyone who thinks. The rational mind is a rare creature, one to be respected and nurtured.
Now Keel was positive that Gallow wanted something particular. Watch yourself, Keel cautioned. He's a charmer. The sip of wine found the hot spot deep in Keel's belly and started its slow burn into his intestines. He was tempted to end this conversation. How much respect did you have for the mines on Guimis? But he couldn't afford to end the conversation, not when there was a source of hard information that the islanders might desperately need. As long as I'm alive, I'll do what I can for them, Keel thought.
I'll tell you the truth,
Keel said.
The truth is most welcome,
Gallow answered. A deferential nod graced the comment, and Gallow drained his wine. Keel poured him another. The truth is that I have no one to talk with either, Keel said. I am old, I have no children, and I don't want to leave the world emptier when I go. My journals, Keel gestured at the plaid-jacketed notebook on his bunk, are my children. I want to leave them in the best possible shape.
I've read your notes, Gallow said. Most poetic. It would please me to hear you read from them aloud. You have more interesting musings than most men.
Because I dare to muse when your men dare not.
I'm not a monster, Mr. Justice.
I'm not a justice, Mr. Gallow. You have the wrong person. Simone Roxsack is justice now, as well as CP. My influence is minimal. Gallow toasted him again with the wine.
Most perceptive, he said. Your information is correct. Simone is Chief Justice and CP, a first. But because of the memory of one corrupt CP, others have always been under scrutiny. You, as Justice, have satisfied the people that there is a balance of power. They wait to hear from you. It is you who can relieve their worries, not Simone, and for good reason.
What is the reason? Gallow's easy smile uncurled, and his eyes leveled their cold blue power at Keel.
They have good reason to worry, because Simone works for me. She always has.
That doesn't surprise me, Keel said, though it did. He tried to keep his voice even, conversational. Get everything out of him, he thought. That's the only skill I have left. I think it did surprise you, Gallow said. Your body betrays you in subtle ways. You and the CP aren't the only ones trained in observation. Yes, well, I find it hard to believe that she'd go along with the Gwymys massacre. She didn't know, Gallow said, but she'll adjust. She's a very depressing woman when you get to know her. Very bitter. Did you know there's a mirror on every wall in her quarters? I've never been to her quarters. I have. Gallow's chest swelled with the statement. No other man has. She raves about her ugliness, tears at her skin, contorts her face in the mirror until she can bear its natural form. Only then will she leave her room. Such a sad creature. Gallow shook his head and freshened his cup of wine. Such a sad human, you mean? Keel asked. She doesn't consider herself human. Has she told you this? Yes. Then she needs help. Friends around her. Someone to. They only remind her of her ugliness. Gallow interrupted. That's been tried. Pity she has a succulent body under all those wraps. I am her friend because she considers me attractive, a model of what humanity could be. She wants no child to grow up ugly in an ugly world. She told you this? Yes, Gallow said, and more. I listened to her, Mr. Justice. You and your committee, you tolerate her, and you lost her. It sounds like she was lost before I ever knew her. Gallow's white smile returned. You're right, of course, he said, but there was a time when she could have been won, and I did it. You did not. That may shape the whole course of history. It may. You think your people will continue to revel in their deformities forever? Oh, no. They send their good children to us. You take in our rejects, our criminals and cripples. What kind of life can they build that way? Misery. Despair. Gallow shrugged as though the matter were unarguable. Keel didn't remember Islander life that way at all. It was crowded beyond merman belief, true. Islands stank, also true. But there was incomparable color and music everywhere, always a good word. And who could explain to someone under the sea the incredible pleasure of sunrise, warm spring rain on face and hands, the constant small touchings of person to person that proved you were cared for merely by being alive? Mr. Justice, Gallow said, you're not drinking your wine. Is the quality not to your liking? It's not the wine, Keel thought, but the company. Aloud, he said, I have I have a stomach problem. I have to take my wine slow. I generally prefer boo. Boo? Gallow's eyebrows lifted in genuine surprise. That nerve-runner concoction? I thought that only degenerates drank it? Perhaps. It's soothing, and to my taste, even if it is dangerous to collect the eggs. Oh, perhaps. It's soothing, and to my taste, even if it is dangerous to collect the eggs. I don't do the collecting. That's one he can relate to. Gallow nodded, then his lips pressed into a firm, white line. I heard that boo causes chromosome damage, he said. Aren't you islanders pushing your luck with that stuff? Chromosome damage? Keel snorted. He didn't even try to suppress a laugh. Isn't that a little like roulette with a broken wheel? Keel sipped his wine and sat back to see Gallow fully. The look of disgust that shadowed the merman's face told Keel that Gallow had been reached. Anyone who can be reached can be probed, Keel thought, and anyone who can be probed can be had. His position on the committee had taught him this. You can laugh at that? Gallow's blue eyes blazed. As long as you people breed, you endanger the whole species. What if... Keel raised his hand and his voice. The committee concerns itself with matters of what if, Mr. Gallow. Any infant that carries an endangering trait is terminated. For a people trained in life support, this is a most painful event. But it guarantees life to all the others. Tell me, Mr. Gallow, how can you be so sure that there are only harmful, ugly, or useless mutations? Look at yourself, Gallow said. Your neck can't support your head without that thing. Your eyes are on the sides of your head. They're different colors, too, Keel said. Did you know that there are more brown-eyed mermen than blue-eyed by 4-to-1? Doesn't that strike you as a mutation? You're blue-eyed. Should you, then, be sterilized or destroyed? We draw the line at mutations that actually endanger life. You prefer cosmetic genocide, it seems. Can you justify that to me? Can you be sure that we haven't bred some secret weapons to meet the contingency you've presented us? Find his worst fears, Keel thought, and turn them on himself. The clatter of loose dishes sounded from the hatchway, and a small cart bounced over the threshold. The young man who pushed it stood in obvious awe of Gallow. His eyes took in every move his boss made, and his hands shook as they distributed the dishes on a small folding table. He served the steaming food into bowls, and Keel smelled the delicious tang of fish stew. When the steward finished laying out the bread and a small cake dessert, he picked up a small dish of his own and spooned a taste of everything. So, Keel thought, Gallow's afraid he's going to be poisoned. He was glad to see the orderly delicately taste Keel's portions as well. Things are not going quite as Gallow would like us to believe. Keel couldn't let the moment pass. Do you taste to educate your palate? He asked. The orderly shot a quizzical look at Gallow, and Gallow smiled back. All men in power have enemies, he said. Even yourself, I'm told. I choose to encourage protective habits. Protection from whom? Gallow was silent. The orderly's face paled. Very astute, Gallow said. By this you imply that murder is the current mode of political expression, Keel said. Is this the new leadership you offer our world? Gallow's palm slapped the tabletop, and the orderly dropped his bowl. It shattered. One shard of it skidded up to Keel's foot and spun there like an eccentric top winding down. Gallow dismissed the orderly with a sharp chop of his hand. The hatch closed quietly behind him. Gallow threw down his spoon. It caught the edge of his bowl and splattered Keel with stew. Gallow dabbed at Keel's tunic with his claws, leaning across the rickety table. My apologies, Mr. Justice, he said. I'm generally not so boorish. You excite me. Please, relax. Keel nursed the ache in his knees and folded them under the short table. Gallow tore a piece of bread from the loaf and handed Keel the rest. You have Scudi Wang, prisoner? Keel asked. Of course. And the young islander, Norton. He's with her. They are unharmed. It won't work, Keel said. If you hinge your leadership on stealth and prisoners and murder, then you set yourself up for a long reign of the same thing. No one wants to deal with a desperate man. Kings are made of better stuff. There's some really good advice in this book, by the way. Just some general hot tips. Gallow's ears pricked at the word king. Keel could see him trying it on his tongue. You're not eating, Mr. Justice. As I said before, I have a stomach problem. But you have to eat. How will you live? Keel smiled. I won't. Gallow set his spoon down carefully and dabbed at his lips with his cloth. He knit his smooth brow in an expression of concern. If you choose not to eat, you will be fed, Gallow warned. Spare yourself that unpleasantry. You won't starve yourself out of my care. Choice has nothing to do with it, Keel said. You snatched inferior merchandise. Eating causes pain, and the food merely passes undigested. Gallow pushed himself back from the squat table. It's not catching, Mr. Gallow. What is it? A defect, Keel said. Our bioengineers helped me up to this point, but now the Greater Committee takes matters out of our hands. The Greater Committee? Gallow asked. You mean that there is a group topside more powerful than yours? A secret clan? Keel laughed, and the laugh added frustration and confusion to Gallow's otherwise perfect face.
The Greater Committee goes by many names, Keel said. They are a subversive bunch indeed. Some call them Ship, some call them Jesus, not the Jesus Lewis of your school-day histories. It is a difficult committee to confront, as you can see. It makes the threat of death at your hands not much of a threat at all.
You're dying?
Keel nodded. No matter what you do, he said, smiling, the world will believe that you killed me.
Gallow stared at Keel for a long blink, then blotted his lips with the napkin. He extricated himself from the table.
In that case, Gallow announced, if you want to save those kids, you'll do exactly as I say.
It comes to pass that the same evils and inconveniences take place in all ages of history. Niccolo Machiavelli, Discourses, Ship Records. From his position at the foil's controls, Brett watched the late afternoon sun kindle a glow in the cloud bank ahead of him. The foil drove easily across deep storm swells, picking up speed on each downslope, losing a bit on each advancing wave. It was a rhythm that Brett had come to understand without conscious attention. His body and senses adjusted. A gray wall of rain skulked a couple of 100 meters above the wave tops to the right. A line storm, it appeared to be rolling away from them. Brett, his attention divided between the course monitor above him and the seas ahead, abruptly throttled back. The foil dropped off its step and moved with minimal headway beside a kelp bed that stretched away into the storm track. The change in motion aroused the others, who, except for Bushka and the captive merman, whom Bushka had locked in the cargo bay with the survivors of the LTA, were sprawled around the cabin, catching what rest they could. Bushka sat in regal isolation on the couch at the rear of the cabin, his eyes oddly indrawn, his face a mask of concentration, as he stroked a fragment of kelp that lay across his lap. The bit of kelp had come up from the sea on Twisp's rescue line, and had attracted little attention until Bushka plucked it off and kept it. Peniel spoke from the co-pilot seat as he came abruptly alert. "Something wrong?" Brett indicated the green glow of their position on the course monitor. "We're only a couple of clicks out." He pointed at the line squall. "The outpost is in there." Twisp spoke from behind them.
Bushka, you still going through with this?
"I have no choice." Bushka's voice carried a distant tone. He stroked the fragment of kelp, which had begun to dry and crisp. It rasped under his hand. Twisp nodded at the net of weapons Bushka had taken from the LTA survivors.
"Then maybe we all better be armed."
"I'm thinking on it," Bushka said. Again his hand rasped across the drying kelp.
"Peniel," Twisp said, "how are the outposts defended?"
Scudi, seated on the deck across from Twisp, answered for him. "Outposts aren't expected to need defenses."
"They'll have the usual sonar, perimeter alarms against dashes, that sort of thing," Peniel said. "Each outpost has at least one LTA for weather observation." "But what weapons?" Twisp asked.
"Tools, mostly," Scudi said.
Bushka nudged the netful of captured weapons at his feet.
"They will have las guns. Gallow arms his people."
"But they'd be effective only inside the outpost compound," Peniel said. "We're safe in the water."
"Which is why I stopped here," Brett said. "Do you think they know we're here?"
"They know," Bushka said. "They just don't know who we are."
He peeled the dried kelp from his dive suit and dropped it to the deck. Scudi stood and moved to Brett's side, resting an arm on the back of his seat. They will have welders, plasteel cutters, some stun shields, knives, pry bars. Tools are very effective weapons. She looked at Bushka, as Gwimmies should have taught us. Peniel swiveled and looked at the passage that led back to the cargo compartment.
Some of those people back there might know some details about what we can expect down there.
This is stupid, Brett said. What can we do against Gallow and all his men? We will wait for nightfall, Bushka said. Darkness is a great equalizer.
He looked at Scudi.
You say you've worked at this outpost. You can draw up a plan of the access hatches, the power station, tool storage, vehicle bays, that sort of thing.
Scudi looked at Brett, who shrugged. Twisp glanced once at the laze gun in Bushka's hand, then at his face. You really mean for us to attack them, don't you?
Of course.
Unarmed?
We will have the inestimable arm of surprise.
Twisp let out a barking laugh.
Let me talk to Kareen, Peniel said. She can't be one of them. She may have learned...
She's not to be trusted, Bushka said. She belonged to Ryan Wang when he was alive, and now she belongs to Gallow.
No, she doesn't.
Men are so easily manipulated by sex,
Bushka sneered. Peniel's dark face darkened further with anger, but he held his silence for a blink. Then,
The Kelp! The Kelp can tell us what we need to know.
Do not trust the Kelp either, Bushka said. Every sentient thing in this universe thinks of itself first. We don't know what the Kelp fears or desires.
Peniel glanced at the bit of dried kelp on the deck.
Scudi, what do you say about the Kelp? You've worked in and around it more than any of us.
She is Ryan Wang's daughter, Bushka blared. You ask the enemy for advice?
I ask where I might get an answer, Peniel said. And if you're not going to use that laser gun, quit waving it around.
He turned from a flabbergasted Bushka to Scudi.
What's the Kelp's range, from your experience?
Worldwide, she said, and almost instantaneous.
That fast?
Scudi shrugged. And what it learns, it never forgets. She noted a look of surprise on Peniel's face and went on. We've made reports. Most supervisors don't go out there, so they write this off to narcosis and keep us out of deep water for a week.
What else might help us?
There are weak spots, Scudi said. Immature kelp is strictly a conductor. Mature kelp carries a presence all its own.
What do you mean?
Twisp asked. If I touch a young patch of kelp and you touch a mature one, we sense each other. But now, it is doing something more. Bushka's right that it may do things on its own.
It has learned to kill, Bushka said.
Scudi said, I always thought it could transmit, but not translate.
Bushka asked, How many people can the outpost support?
Scudi juggled the question for a moment. They have accommodations, food, and other supplies for about 300, but they have open land at the center. They could shelter a lot more people.
Brett turned to Bushka. Does Gallow have 300 people?
Bushka nodded.
More.
Then we can't confront them, Twisp said. This is crazy.
I'm going to kill Gallow, Bushka said.
That's it? Twisp demanded. That's all? Then they'll quit and go home?
Bushka would not meet Twisp's gaze.
All right, he said with a flick of the weapon. Let's see what Kareen Ale has to say. Put the foil on autopilot, Brett.
Autopilot? Brett asked. Why?
We're all going back to see Kareen, Bushka said. Everybody move easily, no sudden surprises.
No one argued with those jumpy, glittering eyes. Brett and Scudi led the way through the hatch and down the passageway. At the cargo hatch, Bushka motioned Twisp to the lock.
Open the exterior hatch first, he ordered. We might want to throw something overboard.
Slowly, reluctantly, Twisp obeyed. A fresh breeze tasting of iodine and salt ricocheted through the hatchway. Wave slaps against the hull were loud in the passage.
Open the cargo hatch and stand aside, Bushka said.
Twisp lifted the security bar, released the hatch, and slid the hatch to one side. Without warning, Brett was knocked down by something wet and ropey coming from behind him. A large strand of kelp snaked past him, swerved left, and slammed the LTA's survivors against the bulkhead. It held them there. The thumpings of the kelp turned the passageway into a great drum. Brett snatched a grab, caught his balance, and saw the wrapped features of Bushka, who was held in loops of kelp. Bushka stood with both arms upraised, the lasgun still clutched in his right fist. Strands of kelp caressed his body, their leaves particularly drawn to his face and hands. More strands lay like ropes on the deck, fanned out on both sides. Scudi and the others were not in sight. A branch of kelp detached itself from the captives and undulated toward Brett. The frond tip lifted and enclosed Brett's face. Brett heard whistling. The wind against the foil, but enhanced, every tonal component identifiable. He felt his senses amplified. The touch of the deck, other people around him. Many others. Thousands. He sensed Scudi then, as though the kelp gave her to him with her thoughts clear. Bushka was there, an enraptured Bushka, drinking from the kelp's reservoir of memories. A historian's paradise. First-hand history. Scudi spoke in Brett's head. "The rocket is up. They're on their way to get the hype tanks." Brett saw it then, a fiery ascent that flamed through the cloud cover and became an orange glow on the gray until it vanished and only the clouds remained. With the vision went a questioning thought, a profound wonder that was not human. The rocket was a wondrous thing of anticipation in this thought. It was a seeking after great surprises. The thought and the vision vanished. Brett found himself sitting on the deck in the foil's passage and looking into the cargo bay. Bushka sat there sobbing. The bay behind him was empty. The kelp was gone. Brett heard others then, and Scudi's voice came over loud. "Brett, are you all right?" He scrambled to his feet, turning. Scudi stood there with movements of others behind her, but Brett could only focus on Scudi. "As long as you're here, I'm all right," he said. And that is where we will leave it for this week. Yep, one more installment, and we should be done, assuming no tragedies transpire, and make it so that I have to cut it off short next time. So yeah, we're just about done. Things are moving quickly. Wow, we got a bunch of people tuning in. Golly gosh, gee willikers. Sorry, my head's all stuffy. Don't know why. Weather change, what have you. Yeah. Trying to think of anything. Oh, yeah. I mentioned this in the Discord, and I had forgotten to mention it on Wednesday. The playlists are updated as of Monday of this week, which was April 7th. I'll update them again at the end of the month. Yeah. So those are up to date. Let's see. Anything else of interest? Oh, right. Last week I forgot to do an album of the week, so this week I'll do two. First album of the week is... Oh shoot, I cannot check it easily. Do I have it up here? It is Electricity by Ibibio Sound Machine. I'll post it in chat. And what will I do for a second album of the week? Something different, maybe. I could do the Budos Band. But which by the Budos Band? Good question.
Burnt Offering was okay, but I kind of like Budos Band 2 better. Budos Band. I forget how that's listed. Is that just the number 2 or is that Roman numeral 2? Arbitrarily, let's go with Budos Band 2. It is entitled The Budos Band 2. So 2 for the price of 1. It's actually 2 for the price of 2. Yeah, that'll about do it, I think. Oh, I forgot. They had that as a separate album. Yeah. So that'll be it for this week. I will see you all Monday, sanity and reason permitting. And yeah, we'll be doing more of Full Metal Panic, Book 3, Trembling into the Blue. And on Wednesday, we'll be doing more Down Below Station by C.J. Cherry. Alrighty, with that, I got a scooch. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. Stay safe, stay sane, and be decent to each other.